Welcome back. This is Sunday edition, the last 30 minutes of the show in the year 2017. And we're talking about the issue of dialogue. There has been much dialogue, much talk about dialogue between both sides of the political divide. And there is supposed to be a strategy meeting by the National Super Alliance tomorrow to on the way forward for the coalition and where the coalition stands. And of course, much focus has been on that issue of dialogue. There was a planned swearing in of Raila Odinga, which was postponed without much, explanation. That is said to be revisited. That's what we understand from our sources. NASA have been accusing Jubilee of being non-committal on the dialogue issue, despite calls from both envoys and the clergy. Let's listen to what the Jubilee side have been saying. President Uhuru Kenyatta earlier did have some interesting thoughts on that, saying that anybody who wants dialogue should speak to the people who will be political players in 2022.
Mimi ningeuliza viongozi wote, sisi ambao tuko kwa serikali au chama ambacho ni tawala sasa cha Jubilee, na hata wenzetu ambao wako kwa upinzani, inafika wakati ambapo tuwasema siasa zitoshe. Tuungane pamoja, tufanyie wa Kenya kazi. Kwa sababu that is what Kenyans now want. They want to see our country transformed. They want to see our country moving forward. And that is the dialogue we want to be participating and engaging in. That dialogue that transforms lives, that brings development. Lakini hii ya kuongea masiasa, hii goje 2022, mtaongea na William, mimi nitakuwa naenda nyumbani.
Right, that was earlier. Later on, that on Jamhuri Day, the president did seem to have a change of heart, or did he, saying that, or calling for talks on unity.
It is time to reject this false notion of politics for politics' sake. The pursuit of political leadership for economic liberation is our future. As President of Kenya, I am willing and commit to engaging all Kenyans and all Kenyan leaders, including my worthy competitors, irrespective of their religious or ethnic affiliation, in fashioning this new paradigm shift.
All right. Let me start with you, Dismas. The president, what do you read in his remarks on this issue of the dialogue?
Well, my understanding of President Kenyatta, he has two positions on dialogue. When he's making the speech off the cuff, he has no time for dialogue. But when it's a written speech, he's got time for dialogue. So, and Desmond Oile is a communication expert. So the question is, which President Kenyatta do you take to the bank? Is it off the cuff, which is probably emotional, or is it the written one, which is structured and rational? And in my view, we should go with the official one because it's gone through the bureaucracy, and that's what is supposed to take Kenya to the next level. That's the first issue. Then the second issue, there's a big misunderstanding of dialogue from a Jubilee perspective and a NASA perspective. From a Jubilee perspective, the top Jubilee leadership seem to think that when Raila Odinga talks about dialogue, they want to come to the cabinet, they want to be cabinet secretary, principal secretaries, parastatal chiefs, or rather they're looking for Nosumukate. Well, from the NASA perspective, they're saying we want dialogue, and they've been asking this for the last 7 years, that they want dialogue. And at this stage, Raila Odinga has crystallized it into three things. The number one, we need to sanitize our electoral process. Number two, we review our democracy, whether or not we retain the presidency, or rather presidential, or we go parliamentary. And number three, work on the issue of inclusivity. And in my view, this is a very unique opportunity for President Kenyatta to shepherd that dialogue, because it's not going to be, or rather, it's not going to be a direct player in 2022. Right. It's going to be his deputy and the rest of the guys.
Right.
So maybe as a legacy, because he wants to take Kenya to the next level, he wants our economy to grow. And there's no way our economy will go to the next level if we don't address the underlying issues of our politics, if we don't address the issues of governance and democracy. So it's got a very huge opportunity right now to invite the NASA leadership and and crystallize the ideas on a dialogue, for him to establish exactly what is Raila Odinga looking at when he's speaking about dialogue.
Okay.
If it's sanitizing the electoral process, he's not going to suffer any loss because he's already won, and I doubt whether one of the recommendations would be that he serves for 1 year. No, he's going to serve his 5 years term. So he's got the unique opportunity of cleaning up the mess that we have at IBC, which gave him a position. It's got the unique opportunity of us cleaning up our political system and establish whether or not we should maintain the presidential, where winner takes it all, and also work on that Article 10 of inclusivity.
Mark Bichache, what are both sides looking at when they talk about dialogue?
There's a misnomer in terms of how both sides understand dialogue. The dialogue that President Uhuru Kenyatta is talking about is a dialogue of development. In other words, he's saying, forget about who you voted for. Let's discuss what you voted for. You voted for roads. You voted for better healthcare system. You voted for free secondary education. Let's bring the things that Kenyans voted for onto the table, and let's discuss how to implement these things. That's why he said, in his inauguration speech, the first thing he said is that I'm willing to take on the ideas that my worthy opponents have stood for. That's the first part. The second part is during Jamhuri Day, he said, listen, let's not discuss politics for politics' sake. Let's discuss the politics of development and pushing the country forward. That is the Jubilee angle on what dialogue is about. The NASA angle on dialogue, as Dismas has ably put it, is the three-point agenda. But the problem is quite easy to solve because, number one, NASA has parliamentarians in parliament. If you want any of those changes, including to the Electoral Act, propose a bill in parliament because guess what? Parliament talks all the time. Parliamentarians are paid to talk. It's called legislation. And therefore, the space within which such dialogues can happen has not been closed. And therefore, I tend to agree with the president that let me not discuss who gets what. Let me discuss what I get, because that's to my benefit. In fact, this is the point where every Kenyan should be selfish.
All right.
If the president is asking, let's discuss what you want, let's selfishly go to the president and say, you know what, I come from Bumula, I want a road in Bumula. I want electricity in Bumula. I want kids to access free healthcare in Bumula. That's what we need to be talking about as a country.
All right.
The politics of positions really doesn't help us.
Ben, just a quick addition. Number one, it speaks about the people who voted for President Kenyatta want to see more roads. And he's forgetting the fact. I mean development projects.
Voted.
Yeah.
Everyone who voted.
Yeah, everyone who voted, yeah.
Yes.
But you are forgetting that about 68% of Kenyans boycotted the elections. That's a key thing that has to be taken into consideration that you cannot run away from. And then number two, when you're talking about taking Kenya to the next level, you cannot ignore the frustration within the voters. And then you say, I'm going to wish it away, and then have the MP sort it out. We know for a fact, if you look at Kenya's history from 1963, any fundamental change in our laws has not originated from the National Assembly or the Senate. It's been originated by external stakeholders, crystallized, and the members of the National Assembly and Senate have merely given it political approval. If you want to begin any change today at the National Assembly or the Senate with the tyranny of numbers by Jubilee, you'll be flogging a dead horse.
All right.
Now, if I may respond. Number one, let me remind him that there's someone called Njokindung who changed the laws around sexual abuse in this country, and she was a nominated MP. She did not need to agitate outside of parliament. Number two, we cannot say that because people have gone outside of the constitution before, let's go outside of the constitution now.
All right.
The third thing, if I may finish,
Fair enough.
is
I want to
every
settle
person,
this duet.
yes, every person who voted and did not vote, by the act of not voting, you voted because you affected the outcome of that election.
Right.
You cannot say that withholding your vote means that your democracy has not happened, and that's a lie.
That's semantic.
Hesbon.
I think it's very
Your
simple,
thoughts?
Ben, yeah?
Yes.
This dialogue that everyone seems to be committed to, both NASA and Jubilee, is something that they now need to show us the actual commitment that they have. And from a communication point of view, I don't think Kenyans are asking for much. Kenyans want to see a situation where the aspirations that they vested in Raila Odinga, the aspirations that they vested in President Uhuru Kenyatta are actually emerging and working for them. And I would imagine that instead of having this boardroom and a cup of tea kind of dialogue, these two principals should just forget about their lieutenants and move together all over the country, telling people that when I was campaigning, I told you that I will address 1, 2, 3. Now that I did not win, and President Uhuru Kenyatta won, I'm here with him. Let him talk about how he's going to address 1, 2, 3 things. President Uhuru Kenyatta, in his own motion, can also make it clear that my worthy competitor, like he has now toned down and is calling Raila worthy competitor, promised you this. We will work with him and see how we are going to actualize this. That will create the perception, which is what this country is looking for, the perception that we are peacefully coexisting and we are a going concern. Then the second thing, then they have to sit down and ensure that they've promised, they deliver.
All right.
If they do that, we are good.
Mutinda, will these two sides ever see eye to eye on this issue of dialogue?
You know, the most important thing is what is it they are dialoguing on. That is probably the most important thing. They need to establish on what are the issues they want to discuss. Like Mark has said, the issue of the presidency and, you know, the legitimacy or otherwise of the presidency, that should actually not form part of the discussion, because if we go that way, then we will not make any progress. There are three things that Dismas has identified: the electoral justice, the constitutional referendum for some changes, and the issue of inclusivity. The truth of the matter is that our constitutional framework has provided for ways of dealing with all these matters that he's talking about. The electoral issues can be discussed in Parliament. Whether they want to first do it outside and go and formalize it in Parliament, that will be upon the structures and the framework they'll put in place for discussion. On the matters of changing the constitution, again, it's very clear. Our constitution only has two ways of changing, either through a popular initiative or through Parliament. Let those who are very clear on what issues they want changed do the job of lobbying and convincing the number of Kenyans that are required so that we can undertake any constitutional review. On the matters of inclusivity, first and foremost, it's important to say that we do not have any deficiency in law. The provisions for that are very, very clear. Yes. So if there are people who have any evidence that there are sections of the government that are not as inclusive as envisaged in the constitution, then they need to build their cases, probably even take the cases to court, and we've seen this before, so that the case again, the court can pronounce themselves on those matters. And those found to have constituted government, either at the national level or at the county level, without adhering to the inclusivity as demanded for by the Constitution, then are taken to task, and the demands are made that the necessary corrections are made. So the framework is there.
Okay. We need to put an end on this discussion. But let me get your crystal balls and views on this, on two issues very quickly. On this issue of NASA insists that they are going to go ahead with the swearing in of Raila Odinga, saying that they are not going to allow what they are calling a fake sense of, false sense of normalcy to perpetuate in the country. Dismas, do you think it's a good idea to go ahead and do that?
You know, Raila sits in a very delicate position. His ghost radicals were telling him that, in fact, he can be sworn in. One of his advisors, Salim Lon, claims that from the August elections, they now have access to numbers that Raila, in fact, won. And in my view, the horse has already bolted. The train has left the station. They should focus on the three issues Raila has identified.
Okay. Mark?
First and foremost, I've said here before that if your ex-girlfriend is getting married, it does not help you to hold a parallel wedding. So my standpoint is the same. I think there are avenues by which the opposition can express itself. They should stick within the law. Swearing in does not have any impact in terms of the Constitution or the law, and will not change the country.
Thank you.
I think, Ben, we need to run away from the issue of the law. We all understand the law. We all understand that the president is in office legally. So the people who are reminding us of the constitutional framework are actually messing up this dialogue that you're talking about. I think going forward, if NASA believes that they have a case and they need to swear in the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, they are justified. Let them do that. If that is what will bring people to the table, they should go ahead and do it.
All right. Mutinda?
I think it's time for people to be honest with themselves and with each other, because the truth of the matter is that nobody is disputing that the NASA leader is Raila Amolo Odinga, and I don't think there needs to be any swearing in for him to be confirmed as such, because it is clear that he's the leader of opposition, and then we have government. So the thing is, let these people engage in the right way and within the confines of the law and the Constitution. Otherwise, when we want to cause chaos just so that we demand for, because if you ask me, that route of swearing in is just about pushing the government to the limit so that they can agree to sit it down. And yet the government has already said it is willing to sit
All right,
down. So
fair
we
enough.
don't need to go to those extremes.
Thank you.
To make a point. I think it is very clear that we have a president and we have a leader of opposition, and that there are pertinent issues that need to be discussed.
Thank
so
you.
The most important thing is to identify them and find a framework
All right.
to have that discussion.
Thank you so much for your views on that one issue. Thank you so much for your participation on the show this morning, and of course the whole year. We have been having, this show has been running for more than 2 years now, but for this year it has been a very tough, long electioneering year, and you have been here with me every Sunday for 2 hours to, you know, to try and dissect issues for Kenyans, governance and politics issues in a very important year, Kenya's biggest election year. Thank you. Dismas Mokua, political risk analyst, political commentator Mark Vichache, political analyst Hesbon Owila, and political strategist Mutinda Kavemba. I will now allow you to go and have a few days of politics for some time and enjoy the festivities. This is the last show of the year 2017. Many thanks for joining us, and of course for being with us here on the Sunday edition, Kenya's premier and only Sunday morning political show, which has gained a lot of traction. Thank you for being with us here. We will do this again next year to just try and have very effective and relevant conversations every Sunday on governance and political issues, things that talk about people who you elected into power, people who make policies for you and for livelihoods for you and your future. Thank you. And of course, here on the show, we stand with the family of our colleague William Sila, one of our sign language interpreters who we lost yesterday, one of the most progressive people in terms of pushing for the rights of the deaf community here in Kenya. Rest in peace, William. Of course, we stand with the family. That's why we leave it on the show for this year. I am Ben Kitili, and as always, we leave you with our Siasa Files. See you next year.